There, that's what it looks like when you hit all your bullets with a spread launcher with 33k. That's 1 billion damage right there. That is 1 billion damage. Welcome back, everyone, to another Borderlands 4 build video, and today we've updated the DOOMFIST Amon build, and we're hitting 900 million damage with it. Yeah, Amon's insane now. So the way this build works is we are taking Raging Inferno, and we are also utilizing Dragon's Breath and Force of Nature to do some ridiculous dots and ridiculous amounts of damage. This is insane. And we're also able to go through shields really fast because of Protein Cell. So let's get into the build so I can explain a little further. We're going to start in the skill tree here. In our red tree, we're putting 26 points, where we're taking Arc, Augment, and Capstone as well. Starting at the top, we have 5 points into What Burns Within for incendiary damage. This is going to be the main source of our dots, so having high incendiary damage is going to be beneficial here. Wield the Storm, status effect damage and status effect duration. The longer it lasts and the more damage for our dots to do, the better. We also have Tritanium Knuckles for increased melee damage and skill damage. This pairs well into our build. Our augment is going to be Force of Nature, which reads, while Onslaughter is active, gun damage dealt to enemies will prime them for a duration and will detonate when they die or are damaged by a forge skill, dealing incendiary damage to nearby enemies. Detonations can also be caused by a melee attack damage, but they deal less damage. The detonation damage is 100% of our gun damage dealt. Prime duration lasts for 10 seconds. The melee damage multiplier is 50%, and the max prime stacks is 10. Now, in the right tree here, we're going to be taking 5 points into Catastrophe. Whenever Amon applies shock to an enemy, he gains increased crit chance for a duration, and whenever he applies burn, he gains increased crit damage for a duration, and both effects stack separately. The crit chance is 5% per stack, and the damage is 10% per stack, lasting 12 seconds for a maximum of 3 stacks. Now, we're going to be taking 3 points into Dragon's Breath. You can go more, but you don't really need to because any enemy in the game is going to die. The most, I believe, is like 10 million HP, and if you're doing 900 million, you don't need it. Whenever Amon activates his ordnance, his next gunshot is converted to incendiary damage, staggering damage to enemies and gaining increased damage dealt. This damage increase is 60%. At +5, it goes to 100%, but like I said, you don't really need more than 3. And we're also going to put 2 points into Fists of Stone. Whenever Amon deals melee damage, restore a percentage of forward skill cooldown. This is going to help immensely for mobbing situations. So you get 2% whenever you deal melee damage, and melee attacks will double this effect, making it 4%. This helps us spam our capstone, which is Storm Cutter. And this is really nice for mobbing, especially because whenever you hit an enemy with this, it restores action skill cooldown, action skill duration, and ordnance cooldown for each enemy hit by 20%. And then we also are going to put 1 point here into our bottom passive, which is Electrical Fire. Whenever Amon burns an enemy, he shocks, and whenever he shocks, he burns. This is really nice with Catastrophe. Moving into the green tree here, we're going to put 5 points into Cast Iron for force skill cooldown rate. This is going to be really nice to just help get that force skill cooldown down. Then we're going to put 5 points into Executioner for increased critical hit damage, which is doubled after dealing melee damage. Then we're going to put 5 points into Destruction Engine for forge skill damage and detonation damage. Detonations is how we're going to be applying those massive dots, and if our forge skill is dealing more damage, that will also play a part in dealing the 900 million or however much damage you're going to deal. Then we're going to go to the bottom right branch here and put 5 points into Raging Inferno. I have 5 points for my class mod, but you could still hit ridiculous numbers with 1, 2, 3, 4 from the class mod as well. But obviously the 5 is just going to be the highest. This reads, action skill damage has a chance to critically hit, and additionally, critical hits from direct action skill damage apply burn. Action skill damage comes from Force of Nature, so this plays a part in dealing the really high dots. Then we have 3 points into Wild Heart for increased status effect damage and hazard damage. Now, For the gear, I applied the 900 million damage that you saw in the beginning of the video with a spread launcher dealing 18,000 damage. If you have a 33,000 or higher, then you can deal more damage, but it's all based on the amount of damage that you put into the enemy with your gun. So spread launchers are obviously going to deal the most. Knife launchers deal a ton as well. However, we also went and tested it with other weapons without the spread launcher. TK's wave is really nice for this. We hit, I think it was around 100 million with Katagawa's. It might have been 50 million. Hot Slugger can also hit pretty high if you do the rotation that I will show you here shortly. Basically, a lot of weapons can work with this build. However, if you want to hit the most amount of damage, the spread launchers are going to be your best bet. Now, for the gear, I'm just running a triple bypass with amp on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a triple bypass. Just anything with amp on it will help deal more damage with force of nature, so then you can in turn deal more dot damage. For my ordnance, I'm running the augmented maiming throwing knife, which is damage amp payload and suppressor augment tied together. So you don't need the crit one. We're taking out the critical hit one and putting suppressor augment on it, so enemies deal 25% less damage to you. For the class mod, Furnace is what I have been going with. This can also get points into Dragon's Breath, which if you have like, I don't know, +3 into Dragon's Breath and 3 into Raging Inferno, that would be the most ideal. I have 5 into Raging Inferno with 2 into Maiming Strike. If those 2 were Dragon's Breath, this would be perfect. For the shield, this is going to allow us to deal really high shock dots. We're running the protein cell. This is going to help immensely with shielded bosses. So what protein cell does is you ground slam to trigger the effect, and while this is enabled, it will drain your shield over time and give you 40% bonus shock damage. This one will apply to dots. Watts for dinner does not apply to dots. So that's why I chose to go here. You are significantly more squishy with this because damage taken passes through your shield. However, we have skills and firmware to help mitigate this. And then for the enhancement, if you're running a spread launcher, splash damage and radius is really nice, but I just have a Jacobs one on because I've been mainly running Jacobs with this build. Now that does lead me into the firmware, which we're going to go with 3 into Rubber Bandman for 5% damage reduction, plus 5 lifesteal, and then the bonuses are doubled from this firmware when you get to 3 points into Rubber Bandman. So we actually have -10 damage reduction and +10 lifesteal. We also have Risky Boots. When health is less than 35%, damage taken is reduced by 30%. And then we have 1 point into Action Fist for increased melee damage. Now in these specializations, we're going to put 10 points into Brute, 10 into Sharpshooter, 20 into Runner, 20 into Daredevil, and 1 into Killer. The rest can go into Runner or Daredevil, whichever you choose. I would arguably go Runner. The main reason we want 1 point into Killer is so we can get Contamination. Critical hits grant increased status effect application chance, and it is 10% per stack for a duration of 10 seconds. And we're also going to have now with Caffeine, because we just like to get our action skill back faster, and that's quite a big issue with Amon in specific because Forge skill and action skill are not tied. So we have to have different ways to get Forge skill back, but we can't forget about action skill as well. It's a whole mess. And we also have a Honed Mind. Action skills gain a chance to critically hit and also gain increased action skill critical hit damage. The damage increase is 50% and the chance is 5%. The last one, you can kind of go with whatever. I just have Groundbreaker on. You could also go with Bare Arms if you wanted to, but we don't really have anything from gun damage to benefit us, so this isn't really necessary. All right, now let me show you how you would set up for a boss fight. So the first thing you want to do, load your spread launcher. Then you're going to activate your action skill and ground slam. Next, you're going to throw your throwing knife to activate Dragon's Breath, and then hit your spread launcher, and then throw your Force skill, not action skill, but you can see we're hitting 33 million dots with 2.7 million for the shock dots because of Protein Cell. And this gave us 700 million damage. So that's with a spread launcher. I could also just show you right here. If you throw 1 Hot Slugger, shoot, Hot Slugger, shoot, and then just punch, we're still hitting 6.9 million for dots with our incendiary dots. But we hit, like, I want to say it was over 50 million. I could be wrong. I didn't really take a close look. But then if you want to deactivate Protein Cells, just ground slam again. But basically, throwing your knife and activating Dragon's Breath is how we're going to get a ridiculous amount of damage. You could see the instant damage was 189,000 just from that alone. And then when we have protein cell active, we're also going to be applying shock to that. So if I do this real quick, ground slam, pop my amp rep kit, pop my action skill, throw this, throw this, throw this, and then throw my forge skill. This is just with hot slugger. We're hitting 1.6, 2.9, 3 million just from 3 shots of hot slugger. Same thing applies with Katagawa's. I punch right there. That was just a really bad amount of damage, and I'm just hitting million ticks. So like you see, it can use a lot of different weapons with this, and that's one thing that I really enjoy about this build is you can use different weapons. Now you definitely are a little bit squishier in mobbing situations, which is why we went with the firmware choices that we did. However, you are just going to be one-shotting a lot of enemies. So as long as you can keep your movement up and keep moving around, you should be relatively fine. And then obviously, if you do go into a second wind and get yourself back up, you're going to have to ground slam again to activate protein cell. If you want to, switching to Watts for dinner when you're mobbing is definitely an option, but I know not a lot of people like to switch parts out from a build, so that's why I went with protein cell. You do become more of a glass cannon. I just think it's a lot more fun to get those shock dots up as well as the burning dots. So if you want to use Watts for dinner, you definitely can. Yeah, that's the build. It's super fun. Doomfist Amon. Amon in general is just so back. He's dealing the most amount of damage in the game now, it looks like. So if you guys enjoyed the build, please leave a like, comment down below what other builds you want me to try, what else you're using in game right now. Who's your favorite Vault Hunter? Mine's Amon. I have like a ridiculous amount of hours on him. Anyways, thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.